Hi, I'm Beth, creator of dryitcanit.com. I like to share with you tips and tricks on dehydrating food, canning food, and share recipes that I do using those ingredients. But today I'm going to try something totally different. The cost of dairy has gone up and down, and I'm not sure that it's going to ever come down to where it was a few years ago. Butter in particular is something that everybody probably uses in their home, whether it's butter or margarine or for baking. Now I have sticks of butter, and when I have just a few left, I vacuum seal them and I put them in the freezer, but I'm down to just one stick of butter. What we use mostly is butter spread. I like it because it's spreadable, quite frankly, and it works really well for everything but baking, in which case I usually use butter. But it dawned on me that I haven't made butter for quite a while. And when I looked at the butter spread and the cost of what this is, and then I looked at the ingredients on the bottom, I found out the ingredients were three things: cream, canola oil, and salt. And I thought, you know, if I can make butter, maybe I can make a butter spread also. So this video is going to do two things. It's going to show you how to make butter, and then it's also going to test whether or not I can make a butter spread and whether or not it's worth it, time-wise and financially, and whether or not it's something that the quality is where I want it. So stay tuned, and we're going to start making butter. To get the butter started, I'm going to start with heavy whipping cream. Now you can use a pint, you can use a quart. My mixer is only so big, and there are different thoughts on how you should start this, meaning starting it cold right out of the refrigerator, or to leave it on your counter for a couple of hours and get to more room temperature. I've made butter both ways, and I don't see a big difference, quite frankly, but I do tend to leave mine out for about an hour before I make it, primarily because I think it's easier to work with, and I think maybe it whips just a little bit faster. So I have a quart of whipping cream here that I'm simply going to add to my mixer. Now, when you add this, you don't ever want to have your cream more than half full in the bowl, simply because it's going to make a big mess otherwise. So for me, 1 quart works really well, and it filled my mixer to about here. Not quite a half, probably a little bit more, like a third. So then I'm using my wire whisk and my electric mixer. If you have a hand mixer, you can start using that, and that will probably work, but I think it's going to be really hard when you get to the thicker stage on the butter. But let's work with this. Now I have a cover that I always put on here when I'm making liquid, using liquid, simply because this can spatter otherwise. So I put my mixer on. I'm going to turn this on low to start with, and then I'm going to move it up to about medium low. And I'm going to get this to the stage of whipping cream. So I'm going to start that, and I'll be back when I get to that point, okay? The cream is whipped enough now that it stays on the whip, and at this time I'm going to switch paddles, and I'm going to do this simply because this paddle will scrape the side of the bowl as I proceed. Now if you look carefully, you'll see that the butter is actually getting kind of grainy. It is coagulating, I guess, in that it's coming together, but it definitely is grainy. Almost looks like little dots in it. That's a sign that we're getting closer to making it to the point of where we want it to get to butter. But we want to keep whipping this until it comes together. Look what's happened now. So we have the grains of butter, but we also have milk below it, which is the milk from the butter, the cream, and the butter and the milk are starting to separate. So this is really an important step. I want you to keep watching. I want you to notice that the butter is grainy and still not really pulled together, in spite of the fact that we have the milk. So I'm going to mix this just a little bit longer until this butter pulls together. At this point, the butter is coming together. It's starting to clump, and there's a lot of milk. So I'm actually going to drain some of this milk off. I just showed you that this was coming together and that it has a lot of milk in it. Now, the fine line between making the butter And mixing that buttermilk back in is right about now because everything's starting to clump. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my mixer, and the butter is definitely turning yellow. I'm not going to be able to show that to you until I drain this. As you see all that milk that I'm getting, that's the milk separating from the butter. And I want that. Now this is different buttermilk than what you're going to get in a store. But it's not as thick, and it's a different culture, but it's something that can be used in baking. Some people will drink it. I don't care to drink it, but it certainly can be done. So I'm going to set this aside for the moment, but I'm going to save this, and I'm going to freeze this, and I'm going to use this for baking. Now I want to show you the butter that we have so far. It's nice, and it's yellow, and it's clumping together really well. But what I want to do is I want to mix this to see if it comes together just a little bit more and if it spins out just a little bit more milk. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll be back again. All right, look at the difference. I mixed this for about 1 more minute, and see how the butter came together and separated just a little bit more milk? Look, the butter comes up all in one piece, and that's really what I was looking for. And I'll drain this now, and then it's on to the next step, which is really important. So you can see the butter has come together in a nice chunk, and I've drained off all of the milk. So the next step on this is to do what's called washing the butter. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to rinse this in room temperature, squeezing it out because there's still buttermilk in there. And that milk in there would make the butter go sour if I wasn't going to use it right away. So watch how I do that. It's relatively simple and takes just a couple minutes. So what I've done is I've added some water to the butter, and you'll see it's a little bit milky. And then I'm just going to start working this with my hands, essentially squeezing it out. And what that's going to do is it's going to release the rest of that milk, so to speak. Now this butter is nice, it stays in a ball. You definitely want to make sure you wash your hands beforehand, but it feels pretty much like maybe a ball of dough would be if you made bread. But you can see how the water is milky. So I'm going to do this 2 or 3 times until the water is pretty clear. I've rinsed this now 3 times, and my water is fairly clear. It's difficult to see from that angle, perhaps. Your water temperature, should be pretty cool to the touch. You'll know when it's the right temperature when the butter doesn't really stick to your hand, but if you get it too warm, obviously the butter is going to melt. So I'm going to go ahead and drain this, and then we'll salt the butter and go on to the next step. All right, look at this. I have beautiful butter right now. It's a nice yellow color, and you can see the shiny little drops of water. I don't know if my finger is going to get down there, but there are little drops of water, and I also want to salt my butter. Now I started with a quart of cream, whipping cream, and to that I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now you might like a little bit more, you might like a little bit less, but I added the salt, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mix that salt in, and then I'm going to let this butter sit for a few minutes while that salt pulls out the rest of the water. So stay tuned, and I will be back, and I will show you. You can already see some of the water coming out at the bottom there. But I'm going to let this sit for like 3 or 4 minutes, and then I will be back. I know this looks white when I turn it over, but it's really a pretty yellow color. But stay tuned, and I'll be back. My salted butter sat for about 4 or 5 minutes, and you can see there's just a little bit of water that I'm going to pour off of this yet. Now, what did I get from what I did so far? Well, what I got was 2 cups of milk. Technically, it's not buttermilk because it's not the milk you would buy in the store, but it is a full 2 cups, and it tastes just like milk, except for it has that little bit of a film on your mouth, like the fat that you can taste, which is probably why I don't like it, because I'm used to skim milk. But this is really, really good for baking and cooking. Just adds another layer of flavor, so don't waste this. Freeze it if you can't use it right away. How much butter did I get? Well, I put a plate on here, and I did a tare weight, meaning I've already weighed the plate. And let's see what we get for butter on here. Let's see. This is 1 solid scoop here. And let's get the stuff off the knife. Remember, we started with 1 quart of whipping cream, heavy whipping cream. And what do I have on here? I have a unit that's not showing me what I have. Bear with me a minute. I have to put this back in here. Live TV doesn't always work the way you want it to work, right? So I have to do that, and then we'll put this back on the plate and see what we have. So it's a beautiful texture and it's nice and yellow. I know it doesn't look like that maybe on the camera. And I have 13.2 ounces of butter, not quite a pound. So is making butter, homemade butter, worth it? You have to do the calculations for that, and I'm going to do the calculations afterwards. But I also want to remind you that my goal today was actually to make a butter spread. And so I'm going to calculate against this too. How am I going to do that? I have my same bowl. I made sure that it was dry, that all the water was removed from it. A couple drops went in there. And I'm going to put this back in my mixer. And what I'm going to do is I'm slowly going to add canola oil, because the canola oil is generally a flavorless oil, and that's really what is in my butter here. It's butter with canola oil. I've already salted my butter, and I know that I have more butter than salt. I don't know what my ratio is going to be, but on your ingredient list for anything, they have to list the ingredients by quantity. So whatever is the most is what the first ingredient is, and the first ingredient on the bottom here is butter, then canola oil, and then salt. So I'm going to put this back on my mixer. I'm going to add some canola oil, and I'm going to see what happens. So stay tuned to see if we can make some butter spread, and if it's more economical to make it at home than it is to buy it. All right, a little experimentation, and I think that I have the butter spread that I was after. I have something that right now is really soft, definitely spreadable, and I didn't measure the oil, but let's see what we have by weight here. I did a tare weight on this initially. Okay, we have 14.9 ounces of actual spread. So we had, what, 13.2 ounces of butter, the salted butter. This is 14.9 ounces. So I added, let's see, 1.6 ounces by weight of canola oil. So now the test is that I'm going to need to put this in the refrigerator and let it get cold and see if it's going to be spreadable. When I mixed it together, it started to look granular. I turned my KitchenAid up to whipping, I think at about number 8, and it all came together. And basically the spread looks a little bit glossy, and I would describe it maybe as the same thickness as a frosting, but definitely a little bit glossy. I also tasted it, and I tasted the butter beforehand, and the salt was just right. After I put the canola oil in, I couldn't really taste the salt, so I did add literally just a 2-finger pinch of salt and mixed that in after I got the consistency that I wanted. So I'm going to put the cover on this. I'm going to put it in the refrigerator. I'm going to let it sit for a couple of hours, and then I'm going to be back, and we're going to do 2 things. We're going to see if it's spreadable, and we're going to do the calculation to see what the cost is to make butter, if you want to stop and make butter, or if you want to make spread like I did, what the cost is going to be on that and whether it's economical. Making the butter from start to finish was about 25 minutes, so relatively simple. This actually was just a couple more minutes to mix in that oil and get to the consistency that I think is going to work. So stay tuned to the end of this so we can determine whether or not this is in fact cost effective. So here comes the moment of truth. Was I able to make a butter spread, and was it cost effective? So let's take a look. This has been in the refrigerator for about 4 hours, and it is absolutely spreadable. It's soft. I probably could have added just a touch more oil to it to make it a little bit softer. All I have is a tortilla chip here, but I can put that on there and I can spread it really easily. I'm not going to eat butter in a tortilla chip, but you can see that it absolutely is spreadable, and I'll absolutely use this. It was a fun project. Is it cost effective? The answer on that? No, it's really not. Unless you can get your cream on a really, really good price, like half price, or perhaps if you are homesteading or live on a farm and can get your cream directly from a cow, then it also would be worth it. So here's what I came up with. I priced out my whipping cream, a pound of butter, the canola oil, and milk, because I ended up, remember, with milk, and did some calculations to determine what did this cost me versus what's in the store. What I did is I priced everything at Walmart. I used brand name because I used the brand name to start with. And on the homemade butter, I come up with 52 cents an ounce for homemade versus 33 cents an ounce if I buy the brand name. Now, obviously, your prices are going to vary a little bit depending upon where in the country you live, but it gives you somewhat of an idea. I also did the same calculation using the generic. So I used the generic Walmart brand whipped cream, the Walmart brand spread, and the Walmart brand butter. And the results were the same. It simply was 43 cents for the Walmart brand versus 25 cents an ounce if I bought the same items by the Walmart brand. So was it worth it to do? You know, it was from this perspective. I think, first of all, it was a fun project. And I think that there's some merit to knowing how to do it if you ever wanted to do it. But I think it's also a great project to do if you have children or grandchildren, just to give them an idea of where some of our food comes from. You know, the cows make the milk, and from that comes the cream, and from that comes the butter. And it was a fun project that really didn't take a lot of time. I think it can be worth it, again, if you have the opportunity to get your whipping cream on sale. I took a look also at the cost of making the spread, and I did the same calculations both ways. I added in the cost of the canola oil. I didn't add in the cost of the salt because it was like a pinch and it was like negligible, but that still was about half price. It was 50 cents an ounce to make the spread versus 25 cents an ounce to buy the spread. Now, that's today's prices, and obviously things can change a little bit. Was I surprised by this? I was. I thought maybe it would be a little bit cheaper. I did the same calculation also taking into account that I had 2 cups of milk that I got out of the butter, and thought, okay, but I have 2 cups of milk I can use, and that came out of the cream. Do I win that way? And the answer is still no. It's still cheaper to buy the products. So I think this was a fun video in that you learned how to make butter, you learned how to make butter spread. I learned that I can make butter spread, but we also learned that it's not always cost effective to make it ourselves. So if you like the video, appreciate a thumbs up. If you learned something, subscribe to the video. It helps the algorithms. It helps my channel get found. I do appreciate your watching, and keep watching for more recipes on canning and dehydrating, as well as maybe some more interesting experiments. Thanks for watching.